ever find yourself lying in bed late at night, tossing and turning, sleep just constantly eluding you as you think about Professor X's sex life? No, I'm not talking about your reams of erotic fanfiction with Professor X and the Brood Queen, Kyle Hill. I'm talking about the end result, specifically Professor X's son, David Haller. Well, clearly the folks at Marvel and FX have been thinking about it because their new show Legion, which premieres February 8th, centers on one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel Universe, who also just so happens to be Professor Xavier's son. But who is Legion? Why should you care? Is it even worth watching? It is. Find out today on The Dan Cave when I tell you everything you need to know about Legion. Today we're mainly going to focus on Legion's origin story, which is complicated because comics. Created by Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz, the character of David Haller, better known as Legion, first appeared in March 1985's New Mutants number 25. He kinda looks like Stinky from Hey Arnold, but he's way deadlier than that Yahoo-swilling dweeb ever was. David was the superpowered product of a torrid affair between Professor X and Gabrielle Haller, a woman that he met while the two were in an Israeli hospital together. Although the relationship didn't last very long, it did produce a beautiful bouncing baby boy who had the perfect blend of his father's powerful mutant abilities and his mother's sometimes crippling mental illness. For better or for worse, both of these highly unstable forces would come to dominate young David's life. Now, David never knew his biological father as a kid. I don't know, maybe he thought like old Chucky Boy used Cerebro to go locate a pack of mutant cigarettes or something. Actually, Professor X didn't even know he had a son because Gabrielle never told him. Ice cold, Gabby. Ice cold. Anyway, when David was 10 years old, his family moved to Paris, where tragedy soon struck. His stepfather was murdered in front of his eyes during a terrorist attack. That was traumatic in its own right, but it had the unforeseen consequence of activating David's mutant abilities. David basically melted the terrorist brains into goo, liquefying them with his incredibly powerful psionic abilities. And in doing so, he accidentally made telepathic contact with his victims as they died, experiencing their emotions and memories in a terrifying rush. And to make matters worse, he absorbed the consciousness of the terrorist leader, Jamel Karami, into his own mind. This event also splintered David's consciousness into dozens of different, disparate personalities that controlled different psychic abilities. The three most prominent of them were Karami, the terrorist leader who controlled telepathy, Jack Wayne, a swashbuckling mustachioed adventurer who commanded telekinesis, which by the way could lift up to 10 tons, pretty impressive, and the moody teenager Cindy, who controlled David's pyrokinesis. But that is just the tip of the dissociative identity disorder-filled iceberg. Some of the other weirdo personality highlights include Timesync, who can manipulate the flow of time, Chain, a living virus that can self-replicate by turning anyone he touches into a copy of himself, Susan and Sunshine, a powerful little girl who can manipulate ambient emotions, Hypnobloke, a foppish dandy in a monocle and top hat who wields the power of hypnotic suggestion, the Origamis, a massive sumo wrestler with the power to bend the fabric of space itself, the Nazi Doctor, a literal Nazi doctor with another monocle who can negate people's powers, Johnny Gamora, who can turn people and objects into salt, and Styx, a skeletal demon who can absorb a person's soul with a simple touch. You know, that old chestnut, that old, I know we all contain multitudes, but this guy contains a Nazi sumo monocle skeleton chestnut. Jesus, that's a lot. Now, if you're wondering why David looks like the bastard child of Kid from Kid and Play and Josuke from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, that's because when his personality splintered, it had a weird effect on his physiognomy, making him look, let's just say unique. The event unfortunately also left David catatonic until his late teen years. While David was in a coma, his true personality was still frozen inside of him, emotionally stunted and trapped at 10 years of age, even as he grew older. After realizing that David was in fact a sweet, innocent kid, Karami sought to restore David's mind to normalcy from within, reintegrating many of the personalities into David's core personality over the years. However, not all of David's split personalities would give up without a fight. Jack and Cindy resisted, and a psychic war broke out between them, taking place in this eerie dreamscape that looked like a combo of Paris thanks to David's memories and Beirut thanks to Karami's memories. Eventually though, David awoke from his coma only for his mother Gabrielle to realize that he was autistic. She left him in the care of Moira McTaggart at Muir Island so he could get the care that he so desperately needed. However, as a side effect of this psychic war raging within him, David's psionic powers began to manifest themselves in the real world. And after David accidentally absorbed the consciousnesses of two of Moira's colleagues, she called in the big guns, the X-Men, specifically Professor X, who brought several members of the New Mutants with him. Naturally, in their efforts to help David, he absorbed Moira McTaggart, Cypher, Wolfsbane, and Charles Xavier as well into his mind war. It was at this time that Professor X realized that he was on the highest stakes episode of Maury ever, and that he was, in fact, the father. No! Once inside of his son, ew, not like that, Professor X learned the multiple personalities called themselves Legion. This is a direct reference to the biblical quote from the Gospel of Mark, "My name is Legion, for we are many. At first, the New Mutants worked with Wayne and Cindy against Karami until they realized that he was in fact trying to help David. Eventually, they found common ground and were able to get David almost completely back to normal. I say almost because neither Wayne nor Cindy would reintegrate into David's core personality, and the same goes for Karami. As a result, they remained separate personalities in David's mind, pushing David to the forefront, but occasionally taking control in the real world to speak to people. Speaking of the real world, once the New Mutants Moira and Professor X escaped David's mind, they returned to their own bodies, and David returned to normal too. Well, as normal as could be, considering everything that happened. Although he was no longer autistic, David's dominant personality was still that of an emotionally stunted 10-year-old. Basically, he's one of the most powerful, tortured, and fascinating characters in the X-Men canon, and it's looking like the TV show is going to explore that delicate balance between emotional fragility and immense power, coupled with some seriously sweet dance numbers. And that, my friends, is Marvel's Legion in a nutshell. But tell me, what do you hope to see in the TV adaptation? Are you going to be tuning in? Let me know in the comments below and give me an Omega-level thumbs up while you're there. Be sure to like and subscribe or else you might miss next week's show when we talk about the story of a New England janitor who returns to his childhood hometown to take care of his newly orphaned nephew and fight crime at night as a costume vigilante in Batmanchester by the Sea. Until next time, keep on digging. Special thank you to the Sundance Film Festival for sponsoring today's episode of The Dan Cave. The festival begins on January 19th, and guess what? We're gonna be there. I'm gonna be in Park City all week long covering the best and brightest in independent film. Follow along on Nerdist.com. Let's open up the old mailbag, shall we? At Devin Coles58 asks, what were your top 5 films of last year? Well, I did a Dan Cave about Nerdist top films, but my personal ones would be Moonlight, Manchester by the Sea, Hunt for the Wilder People, La La Land, and Swiss Army Man. Great movies. So many good ones. At Cam Hollage asks, favorite outside-the-box D&D campaign? Not entirely sure what you mean here by outside the box, but I'm a big fan of the old D20 system Call of Cthulhu campaign setting. It was this perfect blend of Lovecraftian mythos, horror-based role-playing, and D&D sensibilities with a very high player lethality rate. I mean, you were gonna die pretty constantly. Every second felt super intense, and everything felt like it mattered. Plus, insanity rolls, we need more of those. At Panzer Fred asks, what's the best fast food mashup? Oh, that's easy, my dear Fred. It's the Double Double Down Ritos Locos Tacos, which is actually a double cheeseburger from In-N-Out, but the buns are 2 pieces of KFC fried chicken, and all of it's wrapped in a gigantic Doritos Locos taco shell from Taco Bell. The estimated calories aren't calculated